Thank you so much for tuning in to another one of my interviews on my show, William Wallace for America. With me today is Eric Skrmetta. He's a public service commissioner. But what we're going to be talking about today is something that everybody should be paying more attention to here in the state of Louisiana, and it's a microcosm of what's happening in America. And you know it as the Green New Deal scam. And we're going to go over what's happening in Louisiana, but it's something that you should be aware of on a national level also. Eric, thank you for joining me today. Really appreciate it.
Nice to see you, Bill.
Well, you know, we're hearing about the Green New Deal scam, but we're now hearing about how it's affecting us here in Louisiana. And there's a lot of things going on here in Louisiana that I think people should watch out for. We're going to talk about not only how it affects nuclear and electric, and now we don't have the dams here in Louisiana, but elsewhere is like that too, isn't it?
Sure. Well, you know, the whole aspect of what President-elect Trump referred to it at the Republican National Convention as the Green New Scam. The whole aspect of this is this concept of reducing carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And the problem with this has been with the movement towards the push for renewable energy, which in and of itself, if it was very effective, there would not have been the need to provide incentives for this, because technology that works is largely accepted by industry, and you don't need to give incentives for it to go. The problem about renewable energy, the significant problem is there's a difference between passive energy that comes from solar and wind power and baseload energy, which comes from traditional energy forms like coal, nuclear, natural gas, which is what drives the economy of the country. And in particular, Louisiana, half the power in Louisiana, half electricity, is consumed by the industrials in Louisiana, industrial customers. And they can't really do their jobs because of the type of equipment they have to function unless they have baseload power. So this sort of movement towards renewables was a goal to hit net zero as the concept, where it's not absolute zero of carbon dioxide, but it's if there's an offset enough to where you can hit some things that produce carbon dioxide versus some things that don't produce carbon dioxide, hitting a zero on the subtraction table. And so what we're seeing now is that Louisiana can establish itself as a net zero state by establishing ourselves with a growth in nuclear power and being offset with natural gas. And Louisiana can establish itself with being a net zero state between those two type of things. Realistically, it's going to take a number of years for us to grow into nuclear power because of the regulatory construct at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. So we're in a position to where renewable energy will provide a pathway or a bridge to that future. The biggest problem that you have with renewable energy like solar and wind is that because it doesn't work all the time, sun doesn't shine all the time, the wind doesn't blow all the time, means that for every megawatt of power you build out of renewable energy, you have to build a megawatt of power of traditional energy or have it exist to back it up. So when the sun doesn't shine, the power doesn't go out. So you have these doubling of infrastructure costs. So that has been sort of the general cause of the rise of electric infrastructure and rate structure across the country since the Obama administration.
So the regular energy sources like coal and you talk about in oil, those provide a more continuous, more constant, more structured type of source is what I'm hearing. That creates the consistency that's needed when you're producing power, especially in Louisiana where you have all these power companies. Am I hearing that right?
Well, close enough. The difference is that if you think about it this way, because solar and wind are not mechanical devices in the sense, they convert other sources, the wind and the sun, to electricity. They function in a way to just convert and deliver power, right? But if you look at traditional power sources, they're taking a form of geologic fuel, whether it be coal or natural gas or some nuclear fuel, and it turns it into heat, which turns it into steam, which drives a turbine, which drives what they call a spindle, spinning steel, you'll hear the term.
Right.
And they'll talk about these being spinning steel versus renewable energy. Spinning steel is interesting from I'm about to go full nerd on you, but it's an interesting concept because these large turbines and spindles or these large axes, they're thousands of tons in weight. And what they do is, if we have like a power outage, these spindles keep spinning in these bearings. They don't stop spinning. And so they spin at a frequency of megahertz, between 40 and 60 megahertz, to provide balanced electrical load into the system. Okay? It's not the same way for renewable energy. So when the power goes out on renewable energy, there's no spindle keeping going. So if we had a little power outage, all the traditional energy out there can make the power come right back on because we didn't go out of frequency. But if we all had renewable energy and the power went out, we'd have to slowly turn sections of the facilities around.
As the wind starts to blow, the sun starts to come up.
Even worse, you wouldn't be able to turn everybody back on at once. You'd have to slowly work in little small areas or you would blow out the system. And if you blow the system out, you literally have to rebuild the whole system. A perfect example, I think it was Hurricane Ida, when we had the transmission towers come down and we had to rebuild the whole system. Well, we had to rebuild the transmission system here. But we went completely dark. We had a black start, okay, is what they refer to it. And so we could not come back on with solar or wind. We had to come back in with traditional power. And we could not get transmission lines coming from our regular regional transmission organization, which is referred to as MISO. We actually sat down, myself and 3 of the regional presidents, and we came up with a plan on the fly to bring in power from someone we are not regularly in business with to the east, which is the southern companies, and brought in power from a line through the New Orleans power plant, which was not running, but we used it as a switch. And we were slowly connecting neighborhoods one at a time through the region until we stabilized the power. Then we could connect the next section in these different sectional grids. That comes on because you could stabilize it. But if you try to turn it all on at once, they would have been rebuilding this whole place for months. No one would have had electricity. So the same problem exists when you look at, renewable energy versus traditional forms of energy, is that when the system goes out, it's difficult, if you're all on renewables, you can't get the power back on to serve not just sort of the needs of the public, but the needs of the economy. And so you've got to balance that issue. Again, the problem is, for every megawatt you build of renewables, you got to have either an existing megawatt of traditional, or you have to build more. And every time you build more, that increases the costs onto the consumer and the ratepayer. So we have been increasing costs, but Louisiana still has managed it, and we are still the lowest. We're the lowest residential rates in the country. I just got the report today. So we still have the lowest electric residential rates in the country. We are the second lowest industrial rates in the country. And for some reason we got edged out by New Mexico this month. And I don't know why, because nobody's building anything in New Mexico, because they can't build a pipeline. And I had a meeting today with a pipeline company, and Louisiana's pipelines deliver all the building blocks of chemistry to the plastics industry, everybody else. You don't have any pipelines like that in New Mexico. So it's an interesting concept of how the rate structures are over there.
Maybe they excluded some of the other factors.
I think
that happens a lot when government gets involved in statistics. They leave out certain factors and they whatever they want.
I think they nudged it to try and get more industrials to go there, which is one of the reasons we're seeing a bloom of the data processing facilities and artificial intelligence companies coming to Louisiana. Is twofold. One is we're near or at the bottom of rates, which drives those folks to come here and want to be here.
Right.
And 2, we have probably the most simple process for them to get approved into the game. And I think other states are seeing what we're doing, and they want to try to be competitive with us to get this. I know that Facebook was building a processing facility about a year and a half ago in New Mexico, and what I thought was very interesting was they told me it was going to run 24 hours a day on solar. And I scratched my head on that one. But a lot of those people, what they'll do is they'll do what I refer to as spreadsheet solar. They'll buy sectional contracts and they'll offset it like net against running off of traditional sources. They'll run on natural gas or coal at night, but they'll buy extra solar and offset what they originally bought. So
they're buying up somebody else's batteries.
Well, they're buying up somebody's credits. So that's a big thing in the Green New Scam, which is renewable energy credits. They're referred to as RECs. And these RECs are largely used as factoring agreements to get financing. So people will get these renewable energy credits, and they will sell them, they'll finance them, and they will use it to get money to run their business. And so it's a very complicated system, but there's more action in the renewable energy credits than there's actual action of building new solar facilities. One of our cooperative groups, or rural electric cooperatives, had a plan for 3 large solar facilities, which we approved as part of their plan, and all 3 of those failed to make it past, they were built, but failed to make it to where they could actually build it under what the price they quoted. So they couldn't make it happen. And I actually said that they couldn't make it happen at the first meeting. I voted against it because they were not, I didn't feel like they were stating numbers that they could achieve. And sure enough, they did not make it. Their new contracts that they had to do to still provide power to their customers is going to be virtually all natural gas, because they could not deliver, the actual facilities couldn't be done. Now, we have other companies that can do it, and they made pricing where they said they could do it, and it made sense. But we have a lot of folks out there that say they can do it, and they put the ratepayers at risk, but they're doing it to access the renewable energy credits, get those, turn it into cash, and sometimes just go out of business.
What's interesting is, what I'm hearing now is the credits are almost like a play money, if you will. It's almost kind of like a, like a betting card, or something that they can use, and so it's not really producing any new facilities to be able to get to that upkeep, or to get to that level that they need to have the right output to even power anything. Is that?
It's a gift from Congress. It's a subsidy, that the subsidy gets allocated, and they'll burn the subsidy up, and then they didn't really follow up with the cash needed from their own sources, and so they just give up. We saw a lot of that in twofold. We saw it in that, and we saw it also, I'm trying to remember what it was referred to, but it was part of the expansion of broadband, and there were federal programs and allocations of capital, and a lot of them had to give the money back. Some of them couldn't give the money back, and they didn't deliver. Right? So we see a lot of that where the federal government gives the money and not completing the task. We saw it in the Inflation Reduction Act, with the billions of dollars put forth to build out charging stations for electric vehicles, and yet not really accomplishing it. A lot of money gets spent on planning.
It's like printing money just to throw it out the window, and there's no productivity out of it.
Right. Well, a lot of money gets spent on planning, and then it doesn't really kick the next step to start building. So Louisiana has acted in a reasonable way, which is to allow the utilities to work with what I would call the traditional fuel providers, like truck stops, etc., large fuel providers. They want to put in charging stations. So what we've agreed to do with them is we'll have the utilities provide the infrastructure to those facilities, which those facilities pay for, and then those facilities are putting in charging stations, and they're going to charge whatever they want to charge for that electricity. It's not going to be regulated. The charge to that station is going to be a commercial rate. And after that, it's whatever, it's kind of like the price of gasoline. It's whatever they can get for it. So that's sort of the stage for battery electric vehicles. Now, the future And I will tell you that I believe that we'll have another component vehicle probably within the next 10 years, which will be hydrogen electric vehicles, because there is a movement to build out hydrogen fueling stations. Louisiana is the third largest producer of hydrogen. I think we already have manufacturers for these vehicles, about 9 manufacturers. Most of them are sold in California. There's been a dip in their use since about a year and a half ago. The Biden administration signed an executive order requiring that 1/3 of all hydrogen produced in the United States had to be produced with green energy. I mean, basically caused from electrolysis from renewables such as solar and wind, etc. And the problem is, they really haven't developed significant commercial process for this. It's caused the price of hydrogen to basically double at the retail mark. So it's too expensive to use right now for a really what I would call a commercial fuel. But what we're seeing now is large companies like Hyundai are building out tractor trailer trucks that run on hydrogen fuel cell, which is an electric device. It's not a battery. We also see there's a company out of Phoenix called Nikola, which is building the tractor trailer trucks. And these tractor trailer trucks, as different from the Tesla truck, have no battery. They are run on hydrogen. And like the Tesla truck can pull like, I think 10,000 pounds for like 100 miles. These trucks can pull 40,000 pounds for 500 miles. So it's a big differential. So what I do know, and I'm just going to keep going until you slap me. So we know that Hyundai is building out a large facility on the East Coast, which is going to be building out the use of these trucks with port facilities. There's a chance that there is going to be a pathway between the East Coast and the West Coast going through the southern states, and they're going to build it out for commercial trucking. Excuse me.
To make that path. But
East to west.
The hydrogen sounds like the answer to a green energy thing, while still requiring, some of the traditional methods like oil and gas to power it.
Right. I think so. And you can make hydrogen comes out of natural gas. You get it out of methane. Mm-hmm. You can also electrolyze it out of water. You can make it using nuclear power plants. You can use it in a variety of ways. But the thing about hydrogen that I find interesting is anytime you can put more stuff in the mix, everything else lasts longer, right?
Right.
So if people want to drive a battery electric car, great. If people want to drive a hydrogen electric car, great. That makes gasoline cars last longer in the future. It makes diesel cars last longer in the future.
Exactly.
So the more we spread the risk across the fuel profiles, the longer we're going to have opportunities to use a variety of vehicles.
So you give me 2 analogies. One, you're talking about spreading the risk when it comes to alternative fuels or to fuels, traditional or whatever. Likewise, when you spread it across the board, it's kind of like taxes. When you spread it across the base, everybody pays less, so everybody benefits.
Right.
In this case, fuels benefit when you start introducing new techniques, new technologies that are going to spread that
resources last longer. The good news is hydrogen is the most abundant molecule in the universe. So as things taper off in one way, we would actually have something we could build up in another way to build larger resources of hydrogen.
So it sounds also like the Green New Deal scam is like an infectious disease. As you've talked about this, it's affected our economy in a lot of ways. You talk about how the tax credits are just kind of things they're going after to create money for businesses, and they're still going out of business. Some of them that are using the tax credits. You talked about, basically to me that they're just printing money to fund these projects. But as this disease, the Green New Deal scam grows, what other areas is it infecting? What other areas is it complicating things in?
I think you have to look at it as been a source of patronage at the federal level, and it's been pushing money into favored companies of the administrations at that point. When you saw the Obama administration, it went to their friends, it went to Solar City and these other folks. Now when you see the Biden administration, again, this money is going out to favored companies to utilize. Look at the money spent on General Motors. Look, that's driven the price other gasoline vehicles up because they're not being produced on the lines that are being reserved for battery electric vehicles. There have been pushes from the federal government of the marketplace. And people jokingly call General Motors government voters,
Right.
because of the amount of money they get from the federal government is more than they earn, right? So there goes as goes America goes General Motors was used to be the
Right,
phrase,
exactly.
but it's not that way anymore. It's now as goes the government goes General Motors. So we have to look at the trillions of dollars that has been spent on this concept, and look at the value, and I say this a lot, so I get repetitive, the value proposition of money and what we've spent it on. So if we'd have taken the money that we've spent on, just say solar, or even better, if we take the money we've spent on transmission for wind, okay, transmission lines for wind, and spend it on nuclear power, we would have been at net zero already. Because when you build one nuclear power plant, you need one transmission line. When you build one windmill, you need one transmission line. So if you build 10,000 windmills, you need 10,000 transmission lines. And you're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars. So it really is a question of efficiency of working of capital and utilizing the money in a way that's meaningful for the taxpayer and meaningful for the value proposition of what did I get for my dollar?
Right. And while there's many people that say, well, hey, we have to think of the earth in the future. We have to think of clean, renewable energy.
Yep.
But my opinion, and I'll get your answer on this, but my opinion is the more the government tries to force it on us through the printing of money, tax credits, making the incentives bigger than the results, if you will, are we shooting ourselves in the foot by trying to force it down the throats of the market, because of the Green New Deal scam? Or if they just said, hey, look, let the free markets roll. Let's let the solar and wind come out as it progresses and new technologies naturally through capitalism, through the free markets as a way to grow naturally instead of forcing it upon us. Would that be more productive?
No, and I agree with you, because look at it this way. If we look at a couple of examples, right? First off, a solar panel might be 17, 18% efficient, right? Meaning you can convert that. If you could make a solar panel that converted 100%, well, then you're talking about something, right?
Right.
You could take 100% of the value of the sun and convert it into electricity. Then you really have something that you could really scream about, right? But it doesn't exist. So technology has to change. But right now, all we're doing is pumping money into China on that, right? The second thing is, wind and solar only have a lifespan of about 12 to 17 years, okay? So after that 12 to 17 year period, it has to be torn down and rebuilt, okay? A nuclear power plant it could basically last 100 years if you handle it right.
Right.
That means whatever you spend on it, you can amortize over 100 years. Right? So it's got a great value. And two, a natural gas plant can go easily 50 years, right? So when we look at that, in that time frame, you're going to change that solar field out, in some cases, 8 times before you get to the value proposition of what a nuclear power plant can do, and 5 times before you get to what a gas plant can do.
There's a movie out that I watched a while back, and when I mentioned the movie and the director, everybody criticizes me for it, but it was Michael Moore, The Planet of Humans.
Right.
And did you watch that movie?
I did.
And it actually makes the case for conservatives.
We would criticize you for any other reason. Let's not just that.
But when I watched that movie, I learned more about how inefficient solar and wind is and how horrible it is for the environment over traditional methods, like you said, gas and coal.
It also tells you, for me, the issue is not about providing a clean earth. The issue is not about providing a clean, being stewards, because I've seen it shift to the political. I remember, and you might remember too, when we were talking about the California condor, and we talked about there were like 350 left. and they created large swaths of California as protected areas for the California condor. And then somebody said, let's build windmills. And they built windmills. And within the first 18 months, there were 800 dead condors. And they went, yeah, it's okay. And then we're finding that large quantities of American raptors are being killed by windmills. And all of a sudden, the people who want the windmills aren't too concerned about American wildlife anymore.
Right.
Now, if you killed one, you'd be in federal prison. Okay?
And in the Michael Moore's movie, they show these windmills, how they're tearing up the environment just to produce these windmill fields. And then, of course, farmers up north are having these windmills put in on their property. They're getting paid all these tax dollars to put them there, and that's less food that they're making. So this Green New Deal scam is indeed an infectious disease that's affected us in a lot of different ways.
Sure.
How is all this connected to the thing that's coming out now, carbon capture?
Well, carbon capture was originally conceptualized by the environmental left, okay? But the environmental left is not a homogeneous group, okay? They're sectionalized, right? There is a large component of the environmental left that, after they thought about it, they don't want carbon capture because they believe that that will continue to offer the potential of utilizing geologic fuels in the future. They say the longer you have carbon capture, the longer you can use natural gas, the longer you can use coal, because you could capture carbon dioxide and inject it into the earth. And there are other ones who go, well, that's what we should do with it. Now, we've had examples of people that were going to build carbon capture, and the original price was X, and by the time they looked at it a year and a half later, it was 3 times X. And that's going from under $1 billion to over $2.5 billion. And all of a sudden, the value proposition of that and the cost eventually to ratepayers becomes unacceptable. Because A, you're not sure about it, the science is still in question about it, and the earth itself is not what I would call airtight. So there's going to be a certain amount of leakage in there. Anyway, so, you know, we know that besides carbon capture, which I still think we're going to see some variables in that in the state of Louisiana, they wanted to use the carbon dioxide to inject into oil fields to press trapped oil out of the fissures. And so
like fracking?
Well, it's kind of like fracking, but it's just basically pressing oil out of fissures. But what we're seeing now is there's a lot of oil that's coming back into empty fields anyway, because there's some concepts about the earth regenerates oil and natural gas from just the heating of the earth's core, and it causes byproducts of natural gas and oil. So it's almost like those fuels are renewable. So it's an interesting concept.
I mean, what a lot of people don't realize is that when the oil wasn't just found because somebody said, hey, we're going to start drilling into the earth and we're going to find a fuel source.
It was on the surface.
Yeah, oil came out on the surface.
Right.
And it was polluting the earth. It's almost like burning it off as a way of controlling it and getting rid of it naturally.
Right. Well, but besides the issue of that, now the federal government has funded a facility in West Louisiana with taxpayer money to do direct air capture, they call it. And direct air capture, to me, I mean, look, it's not my thing because we don't have anything to do with it at the commission, but I don't see the value of it because what it is designed to do is quite literally consume the atmosphere and remove the carbon dioxide from it and inject it into the earth. And it runs off of natural gas power plants. So it can't run off of renewable energy.
So basically, as you always say, traditional methods like oil and and
predominantly
gas,
natural gas,
and coal is natural gas is being used and burnt
to power it.
Air quote polluting
right.
To be able to capture carbon dioxide out of the ground,
Right.
put it under the earth, which no one knows the real results
Right.
of. But more and more studies are finding out how bad it is for the environment to do that.
It's like a snake eating its own tail, right? So, but the federal government is going to pay these companies many dollars per ton to inject it into the earth. And look, visions of space, the movie Spaceballs comes into my head when I think about this thing, right? About just vacuuming the atmosphere. And it really is something that you question the viability of, because in the original concept they were going to use all green energy. But the green energy can't produce, again, going back to the beginning, it can't produce baseload power for long enough to drive the horsepower that these engines, these electric engines, are there to drive these machines, right? Because, you know, you think about horsepower as electric motors, you say, well, 1 horsepower motor, they have 1,000 horsepower motors. These things are massive.
Thousands of ounces and pounds and gallons of fuel.
Well, they take massive amounts of electrons to drive it. So I'll give you a very interesting example, and it's a local example. In New Orleans East, there's a one solar field near the Industrial Canal. And it was built, I think about maybe 6 years ago, and it's got a battery there for powering when the power goes out. But you don't just store it and keep building it. You gotta, if you put it in there, you take it out of there. So it's constantly put in and take out. So you fill it, you take it out. But when we talked about it in the original approval of this, they told me, I said, well, okay, well, this is what it does. I said, okay, how long does the battery, what does the battery serve? And they said, well, it serves like 160 homes. I said, well, that's great. I said, for how long? And they said, for an hour. And I went, and how much did we pay for this? This is the problem is, again, it comes back to a value proposition. So there's my dog. Yeah. So, but it's a value proposition, right? And so that's the issue with this. Because I want to see the public get the best bang for the buck they can get, right?
So the carbon capture, are they getting the best bang for their buck? So basically, their tax dollars, and of course federal tax dollars are being printed to be able to incentivize companies to suck this out of the air and pump it on the ground, which no one knows the results of, so that the public's not getting the value for their tax dollar. But then, to my recollection, isn't carbon dioxide also fuel for trees?
Yeah, it works that way. It's plant food. And you know, we've seen this on congressional testimony that the people who are pushing this don't even know the content of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And the content of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is 0.04%. And there's a movement through this effort to reduce it by half. And if we went to 0.02% the last time it was at that level, I think, I've heard we were in an ice age, and plant life dies at that point. We would basically, A, not be able to achieve it, and B, ruining mankind.
Right. So it's almost kind of like green energy. It's gonna while the narrative is that it's gonna be better for the environment, it actually ends up having a negative effect when you think about the solar panels, that are thrown into landfills, and you think about the windmills that are killing wildlife and then having to be torn down and put in the landfills, and now carbon capture is kind of have the same result.
Well, and I'm going to shift gears on this a little bit. So if the value of renewable energy credits is good enough for people who build solar fields and windmills, why isn't it good enough for farmers who grow crops, who absorb carbon dioxide as they grow, and as they cut it down and it grows again, it's constantly consuming carbon dioxide, number one. And why isn't it good enough for everybody who's got a front lawn, or a back lawn, or grass, or trees on their property, which consume carbon dioxide? Why aren't they getting a tax credit?
Great point.
Because, and I'll tell you why. Because decisions were made by a democratically controlled Congress to identify their friends to give tax credits to. Because if they gave it to everybody who provided the value of absorbing carbon dioxide through green growth, it would bankrupt the country. Now, I saw an interesting fact that we're talking about the country of Canada, right? Canada has a rule that they're going to eliminate 30 billion tons of carbon dioxide annually. And a guy came out and said, okay, how much does a tree absorb? And they did the math, and they figured out that they absorb, because of their massive forests, they actually consume 300 billion tons of carbon dioxide annually, and it will take them 100 years to get to the point where they're not absorbing if they had growth of carbon dioxide. But the government still wants to tax the people on a carbon tax to achieve that when it's already done.
It sounds kind of a racket for me.
Well,
the government puts out the narrative to be able to make people feel good about paying taxes. It costs them more money to be able to pay for the environment, so to speak. And at the same time, the people end up paying for it in higher taxes, but we don't get the benefit, or as you pointed out, the value for our tax dollars. And then the net result is going to be worse for the environment later.
Yeah. Well, in the end, it really is an issue of, identifying patronage, right?
Right.
Because if it was good and it provided value for everybody, right? We're in a position to say, well, the greater good is for everybody to get a value out of it.
Right, exactly.
And so that's the real problem with this, is that whether it was us doing, whether we were doing, let's say, carbon capture, or whether we were doing green growth as an absorbent, or whether we were doing anything about this, it'd be a value that society would encourage.
Right.
But what we're encouraging is select industries, select individuals to get a value. And once you do that, you're identifying special interests, and special interests are the ones who are taken care of by their political leadership, right? So I do think that
it sounds like a racketing scam.
And look, but think about this. It was called global warming before they showed that it really wasn't, so then it was climate change. And, it all sort of roots back to this Agenda 21, issue of the United Nations, where it's a wealth transfer concept to sort of reduce the effectiveness of the 40 Western nations and to help the other 140 nations in the world expand their industrial development, which, if you think about it, that's not exactly good for the environment to expand the industrial capacity,
right,
and have 180 countries being industrial versus 40, and have the 40 of them be more efficient at it. So, that issue is, a concept where you have to think about it is, that's not what it's about. It's about taking money and transferring it to someone else, right?
Like I said, it's like a money laundering scheme again.
You could call wealth transfer money laundering, and you'd be right? So, but look.
So for the little people who are basically following the narrative around, that they're willing to pay taxes to be able to satisfy the narrative of global warming, are actually, in essence, putting more money in the wealthy and well-connected people's pockets.
Oh, I don't think you're even on I think you're on the very beginning of that. I think you've got to go way deeper on that. I think we're helping not only wealthy people, but we're helping other countries. And we're not doing ourselves any favors. We are building the economies of other nations and diminishing our own, because we're not developing our own technology and our own power resources. Because think about this. If we did not buy solar panels or solar technology from China, that would be a big hit to China.
Absolutely.
And if we built our own nuclear power facilities and we built our own equipment, we would help our own citizens. We could build our own economy. We could get more people living in Louisiana. We could people, welding, throwing hammers, building stuff, and giving people employment. Because the last thing I want to see is people, giving our money to other countries when we ought to be giving our money to our own people. And, I met with these pipeline people today, and we were talking about ethylene, right? And ethylene is used to make basically every kind of plastic you get, right? And Louisiana is a massive producer and distributor of ethylene. And I sit there and I go, yeah. And then what do we do with it? We send it somewhere else to be made into something. And so it's hard to transport liquid ethylene, so they make it into pellets, like the plastic pellets. And then they send the plastic pellets to China. And they turn it into plastic, and they do injection molding there, and they make it into parts. And they send it back to us to pay for it. And so
it's almost like our seafood.
Well,
They're having people catch the seafood here, ship it over to China to process it, and then they ship it back to us as prepackaged. Prepackaged.
Well, let me put it this way. It's the seafood times a billion, right? It's so much bigger than that. And as a kid who grew up in the seafood industry, I can tell you that, we have a problem with the way that the seafood industry is handled, but we have a bigger problem with how trade is handled. And I think President Trump is going to make big moves on tariffs. And I'm going to tell you why I think tariffs are great. Because it's not about taxing other products. It's about putting up tariffs that are so sizable that those countries will begin building factories in the United States to jump the tariff and give people jobs and make the products in the United States. And that is the key to success for this entire process, is that, we don't, I've heard other people talk about, I want to put a carbon tax on China. Well, as soon as you start talking about taxing something, then eventually it turns around and they want to tax us.
And not that, but they start to play better.
Well,
they start to play nicer.
Right. Taxes are taxes, and taxes are like it's like a meteor. They go around the world, right? But if we set up the right tariffs and we encourage, job development and factory development, I think it's important. I think one of the things I'm very cautious about is the fact that every pharmaceutical industry in the United States is in some joint venture agreement with the Chinese government, which is effectively the People's Liberation Army.
Right.
Those companies need to come back to the United States. Those companies need to be manufacturing here. And we can
adhering to our standards.
And they well, let me put it this way. Let's say we got into a bad situation in the world and we were all, let's say, lit off number 3 and we were all fighting each other. And we needed medicine for our troops, our families, our citizens. And one of our enemies is the source of our medicine. That doesn't seem like it's a really good thing.
No, not at all.
So we need to be self-sufficient, whether it's food, medicine, energy, supply. We need to be able to build our own, systems. And we did it in World War II. We did that. We created our own systems that we did not have. And it was tough on the American public. We did have to figure out a way to handle a lot of stuff.
Right.
Rationing and development, all these issues. And we would have to do it again. But my point is, there's no reason why we can't have that now. Because we can develop economic systems to encourage people to build facilities here. Trump already, when the discussion about basically putting it on the auto builders in Mexico, well, they're not even going to build the factories in Mexico.
Right.
They're going to build them here and utilize our systems. That is a forward-looking approach to job creation and economic creation for the United States.
So let's go back to carbon capture for just a second. Is there a way to maybe wake up more people on this? I don't want to say stop it. I do want to stop it, but is there any way that we can wake up more people on how to correct that situation? The Green New Deal scam on energy is another question coming up in a minute. But what can people do to be able to correct the Green New Deal scam as it pertains to carbon capture?
I don't think that there's a consensus on carbon capture about good, bad, indifferent. I think that there's sections of the world that all have different opinions. Economics are going to drive the decision making on carbon capture. You've got, like I said, the fractionated environmental left have different opinions on whether or not this is good. We have a lot of them are, joining in on the green growth concept. Plant more trees. They haven't even conceptualized the fact that, American farmers have massive carbon sequestration mechanisms for growing grass. Sugarcane is a massive carbon too. In fact, when you think about sugarcane turns seeds into sugar. Sugar is the greatest concentration of carbon there is. It turns sunlight and earth and air and carbon dioxide into concentrated carbon, right? It is a way of pure carbon sequestration, right? It turns it into energy for people to consume.
And this is what plant?
Sugarcane.
It's amazing. It's
Right.
right here in Louisiana.
Right.
So
Because-
basically, carbon capture in Louisiana could be solved by us growing more sugarcane.
I think so. But think this: sugarcane is grass, so it's like grass on your lawn. It's why cows eat grass, and they talk about cows that eat grass make sweet milk because it converts it, and all of these. It's the look. It's isn't it interesting that God created a system of nature that took care of this, right?
Right.
And if we kind of think about that in the great sort of resolve of what the great architect of life came up with, that we can see how nature can take care of itself if we don't try to mess with it too much. And we sort of encourage nature to take care of it. And we try to, manage what we do that is genuinely wrong, but fix it. But at the same time, promote practices that help our environment, promote clean water, promote clean air, promote good, clean food, to do all of that. But we do it in a sensible way and not in a way that just looks like patronage to give people a giant stockpile.
Or another word for carbon sequestration, in my opinion, is it's almost like burying the garbage under the ground and being paid to bury the garbage under the ground that does nothing instead of leaving it in the environment where it's going to produce something.
Well, that, and who knows if it's going to stay in the ground.
Right.
I mean,
So it's already been proven it's not.
Well, so if you're paying them to pump it in the ground, do they give you a rebate if it comes out? And the answer is no.
Right.
So I will be glad for you to pay me to pump it in the ground all day long, and then I get to take it and pump it back in the ground again.
It's almost like when they took sulfur or lead out of the gasoline for the environmental reasons, and now farmers are having to add sulfur back into their crops or their soil for fertilizer because they used to get it out of the air naturally.
There's different things to look at, but the fact is man is interesting because man believes that he can alter the sort of cycles of nature, and man's not that smart.
He ends up screwing it up more than he does helping nature.
Well, man can mess things up better than they like to admit. But again, all the efforts we do can be wiped out with one volcano popping. One volcano going off, it basically ruins
the window.
everything we've done is ruined by one volcano going off a year.
What can other people do to help stop the Green New Deal scam, as we've talked about in this interview? Are the things that people can do? What would you do? Do you have any answers on things that you would do to help slow it down, say in Louisiana and as a microcosm of our country?
Well, first off, they need to become politically active, contact their congressmen and their senators, and tell them, look, why don't we do this in a rational way, right? If we want to be net zero, if we really want to do this, then you got to do it in a meaningful way, because we're never going to achieve it through new renewables. Everybody has basically...
Or carbon capture.
Well, or carbon capture. Carbon capture is, if you're not making carbon dioxide from power plants, then you don't have to capture it, right?
Right.
So if you achieve growth in nuclear power, which is going to happen with the advent of these data centers, they all want nuclear power. So you've got these companies like Alphabet and Amazon and Nvidia and Tesla. They all want nuclear power plants. And they're all willing to pay for the bulk of it, right? So they're saying, we want this. And you go, okay. And that's going to put us in a position to where we reduce our carbon dioxide output to zero. They are zero producers.
Right.
And we're going to get power. And then with the sort of matching of natural gas power to benefit Louisiana in its natural gas production, right? Because we use natural gas for power, we use natural gas to make chemicals. Look, Louisiana is a big chemistry set. Between salt, sulfur, carbon black, petrochemicals, we are the building blocks of chemistry that take care of the world, right? And so we just have to manage it, right? But people should do things that make sense, right? And things that make sense, if we want to reduce our carbon dioxide footprint, is to not build devices that take a lot to make them, right? Take a lot of carbon dioxide to make them. Not support not support a country like China that builds a new coal plant every week, right?
Right.
And we're shipping out, our coal exports are so massive, and the bulk of it goes to China, right? So if they're conceiving that, what are we doing? See, I'm not anti-coal. I think coal is fine. I think that new coal boilers and new technology would take care of this. Because we're working off a lot of old coal boilers, right? I think nuclear boilers on old coal plants are a great solution to changing the electric dynamic in that field. But, we're in a position to where, we need to, move forward in a way to spend our money, what I look at, in a wise way, right? I don't want to support the government of China. I don't want to make their economy good and every 12 years do it again.
Right.
And at or more than double the cost, probably triple the cost of what it originally cost, because it's not going to be the same price.
Meanwhile, in the meantime, we have with the Green New Deal scam that's operating or riding on the back of the narrative that we have to be taxed to be able to improve our environment, while it doesn't help anything but also probably worsens it in some ways, gets us to that point, like you said, every 12 years we're giving China more money.
Well, we shouldn't be taxing us, we should be giving ourselves tax relief. If we gave ourselves encouragement to absorb carbon dioxide through green growth, through our own actions, we would find that if you calculated the value of this, you would find more people doing more to do this. You would find more people planting things, more people taking land that would produce crops or plants that are super consumers of carbon dioxide, if that's your goal, right? The question is carbon dioxide a pollutant, right? The answer is, it's never been scientifically proven to be a pollutant, right? In the Inflation Reduction Act, I believe that's where it was. It was never before listed as a pollutant, and it was listed as a pollutant by fiat. It said carbon dioxide is a pollutant. So
Who created that fiat?
The Democratic Congress.
Okay, now you.
Okay. Now me, what I would do if I was the new administrator of the EPA, I would say that it's not a pollutant until it's been studied to determine if it is a pollutant. Because look, if you can't challenge the science, it's propaganda. Okay? So carbon dioxide should be looked at scientifically to determine if it's a pollutant. I don't believe it is, but what I can tell you is, if universities get paid to tell you it is, then they're going to tell you.
They're going to tell you it is.
But if we get true independent evaluation, and I think that's the pathway for this, because you can't just say, okay, what if they'd have said, water's a pollutant? What if they'd have said, nitrogen's a pollutant? What if they just said, okay, because we said so? You were that kid too, right?
Right, exactly.
Right? So, because I said so is not a valid reason. And again, if you can't challenge the science, it's propaganda.
Well, why wouldn't water be a pollutant? I mean, urine is in water form, so shouldn't water be a pollutant? Using, of course, the narrative that carbon dioxide is a pollutant, when in fact it has benefits.
I think anything other than what you got is a pollutant, because it's not technically what you are.
Right.
So any substance is a pollutant. The question is it a good pollutant or a bad pollutant, right?
That's right.
So, but I really feel like the solution is to approach the concept of carbon dioxide as a pollutant through the clarity of real scientific study. And the thing that's bothered me most is the way that was done by fiat and through the Democratic Congress. And I think it was a mistake. And I think that, all things being fair, and I know fair is a terrible word because it's got a lot of permutations to it.
It has some joy in it, right?
It does.
If fair has joy, is it a good thing?
Well, it's got too many. It's got the same letters as other words. But I will say that it makes perfect sense to do reasonable analysis, right? Because that's all we do at the commission, right? We analyze stuff. We analyze rate structure. We analyze concepts. We do deep analysis. We pay people tons of money to do analysis. And at the end of it, we've got to look at it and go, well, this makes sense or this doesn't make sense.
Right.
But what we don't do is sit up there and go, yeah, okay, I'm just going to do this. Well, no, you can't do that. Because the action of doing that, and I'm going to tell you why.
Yeah.
Because anytime we do that, our rules can be challenged for being arbitrary and capricious. Because if we take an arbitrary act that's not based on reason, the public or a company can take us to the Supreme Court and say, they just did it because they wanted to do it.
So you have to do it to be accountable.
And we have to have a reason, a genuine, legitimate reason to do it. Congress did not have a reason to do it other than they wanted to put it in. They put it in one of the deep buried lines in the act. And it was the act that was many thousands of pages. It was the Nancy Pelosi shuffle.
Eric, your information is unbelievable. We could probably talk for hours, but as we wrap up a little bit, I want to make sure, do you think there's anything else on the Green New Deal scam that you want to get out to our listeners today? Is there anything that maybe they can be more aware of? Maybe how much of a scam it is? I mean, not that you give a ton of great information right now, but I want to maybe just give you another chance to get some more information out there.
Put this in
Your
perspective.
wealth of knowledge.
Put this in perspective. First thing is, average folks do not pay that much in federal tax, but they're paying taxes in their state. And you're paying taxes in state because other people get impacted. Businesses get impacted by the costs of these things. But think of it this way. Let's say your average utility bill right now is, I don't know, $150, whatever it is. So call it $200, right? If we did not have the Green New Deal, the Green New Scam, your utility bill would be $100.
You think that people not our state but in America are paying that much difference, that much of a percentage difference in taxes because of the Green New Deal scam?
Yeah, absolutely, and I do. I think that utility rates have risen across the country excessively. And like say Louisiana, say our rates are
because the utilities are passing on the cost of their costs.
By federal law, they are allowed to pass on their costs, right? But the federal government tells them what they have to do to meet standards under the EPA, right? And that's what we do. We fight the EPA. We were, as commissioners, we fought we won the part of the West Virginia versus EPA case.
Right.
We helped defeat Chevron deference. We were part of all of this, right? And so you have to look at this and go, Louisiana's rates are, let's call them 8.5, 9 cents, right? California's almost 50. This is to show you differentials.
Because how much regulation they have.
Because they're massively regulated and massively increasing cost by tax, right? Because they're pushing more and more energy. Plus they have more and more brownouts and what we used to call blackouts. But they basically, if they say brownout, doesn't sound as bad.
A blackout is, of course, when it's an automatic shutdown. Brownout is more intentional, right? We're only dimming the lights a little bit.
Well, that's what they call it, load shedding. That's the new term for blackout.
Ah, okay.
Right? Basically saying, we're turning off your power so we can keep that area on power. Okay? And it's called rationing, right? And California has gotten rid of so much stuff. They're actually started building some gas plants in California because they over whoopsied, right? But another element is that California gets coal power from Arizona and Nevada, but they just call it imported power. They don't call it coal power, right? And they're building massive transmission lines that cost billions and billions of dollars to bring in energy from Idaho and Washington State and Nevada to bring all that power to California. But the U.S. taxpayers paying for it.
So the U.S. taxpayers paying for them taxing their citizens because of coal and oil and all the other what they call sins, but yet California is buying energy produced by those same sources from other states and then having it shipped over their state lines, and the taxpayers of all of America are paying for it, and California citizens are paying for it in higher taxes and regulations.
Pretty much, and now
it's
not over yet, because the production tax credit is a tax credit that was made under the Democratic control of Congress, which allowed for the building of renewable facilities, right, like windmills and solar. And it was pretty hefty. It was like a virtual allowance that let them build it for zero cost to them, right?
Right.
The federal government paid for it. But they built it with no transmission lines. So they just built it. It was referred to as a stranded asset, right?
Is this kind of like when New Orleans built their airport? They built
Pretty
an
much.
airport but didn't build any roads to get to it?
No road. But the problem with this is, so they built it and then they go, well, we need the ratepayers to pay for the transmission. So they didn't pay anything for the windmills. Now they want all you, because Louisiana people are going to get hit with transmission costs from stuff in the Great Northern Plains that come into the market, and we're fighting that right now because they want. Right now, there's a regional cost coming in, a small thing of about $30 billion that
Right.
is shared across the central United States, but they want to go up closer to $300 billion, and we're not getting that value, and we're fighting them on this.
Unbelievable.
And this is a never-ending fight for us, right? So but the question is, why are we building it? Now we have environmental groups that want to reauthorize the production tax credit to build more wind, to build more solar, when the system, they can't, even these regional transmission organizations, they realize that you can only have so much renewable in it, or it goes out of balance, you lose your frequency, and you go to a real blackout, right? So they're very cautious about how much they let into the system.
Right.
So like in Louisiana, they said, well, we want to get like 2,500 megawatts or something from renewables. And I could show you today in the whole marketplace, which is from Manitoba, Canada to the Gulf of Mexico, basically the center of the United States. We were running at 3% solar and 20% wind, and all that wind comes from north. But when the fronts quit stop, I've seen wind be 2%. So that has to be brought in from something else. So if it wasn't for coal and natural gas and nuclear is always consistently between 13 and 16% price power.
Right.
But coal and natural gas make up the difference. But now they put in another category of imported power. And I'm finding out that imported power is diesel. So we're burning diesel fuel. Sorry about that. But we're burning diesel now to make up the difference on renewables. So this is really not a good thing. So we need to refocus our energy on value for dollar, long-term value for dollar, and the value proposition to protect the consumer and the taxpayers of America, right?
Exactly.
We want to make sure that what we're building is not enriching our enemies, China, number one, and we need to make sure that. Look, I passed a rule at the commission about a year and a half ago that we didn't want any control systems from North Korea, the Republic of China, Iran, and Russia. And I actually had blowback from some of our commissioners. And
I bet I can name one of them.
there were 3 of them. So we couldn't pass it the first month. So I wrote an article about this. And the next month, we reevaluated it and we passed it. But Louisiana is the only state in the union that blocked this. Now there's movement now in other states. And to give you another example of early things that Louisiana did that was very successful is in the net metering of solar facilities, right? We looked at this, and net metering is largely considered rooftop solar retail for retail, right?
Right.
Problem is, eventually you run out of other people's money, right? Because if you're getting paid retail, whoever doesn't have solar on their roof is paying for it, right?
Right.
And you're paying for the upkeep of the grid. So what we had to do, we had a limited amount of solar available that we could allow.
Right.
But if we made it wholesale for retail, then we were in a position to where we could take the cap off of solar. And everybody could have solar if they wanted it. So it was a financial decision and a political, well, what do you political decision? It was a financial
Right.
and an engineering decision. So we did it. So we went retail for wholesale, right? So Louisiana is the only state in the union was listed as not having net metering because we didn't do retail for retail. And they've got a lot of grief about it. But now, California is starting to do what Louisiana did because they can't afford it.
Right.
They've reached the point where they go, yeah, this doesn't work.
Retail for wholesale might be a good idea.
Yeah, retail for wholesale is a great idea. Well, it's because eventually, like Margaret Thatcher once said, eventually the problem with socialism is you run out of other people's money. And so, but I'll finish this up. The thing that I think we should do is encourage our elected officials to move into a balanced position of not giving production tax credits for more renewables. I think we've got enough renewables right now in the country. We're in a position to where we should move into letting that be a bridge fuel for about 12 years. When they are finally run out, don't replace them, just take them out of the system. And in the meantime,
Let the free markets take over.
let the markets come in the sense of we need to put in more natural gas and more nuclear, have that be net zero, where we can't have an argument about having carbon dioxide coming from this,
Right.
And bring that forward, and then we're in a position to where we've got stable baseload power for building economy. Get more industrial process, more manufacturers, more folks here.
Right.
And so, in Louisiana, we're going to have 3 or 4 AI systems now.
Wow.
And that's not going to be a tremendous amount of work. But the what I see as a value on that is we've lost 150,000 plus people. We're going to get people coming back to Louisiana for jobs.
Right.
But the more excess power we have, more people are going to build factories. More people will come work in those factories. And job opportunity is great for our state. And I think that we're just on that cusp, right? Of making the thing work, and you can't make it work if you're not being logical about the process to get us there. So, but I would like us all to have tax credits for mowing our lawn.
I love it. That would be great. if we could get some tax credits every year for mowing our lawn,
I don't see why it should be a problem.
I mean, they're paying it to the big guys, right?
I think farmers and anybody who's got a little patch of ground, they ought to figure out what it could be.
The farmer's growing
The
stuff.
farmers-
He's sucking out the CO2 out of the ground.
The American farmer has so much acreage out there working every day for us,
Right.
that it has to count.
Not to mention, and not to backtrack here, but no one's even talking about how the carbon can be sold in concrete, in brick forms. There's ways to sell it in concrete form,
Yeah.
to put it into the concrete, for building.
You can
And then it's trapped forever.
and you can inject it into soda.
Exactly.
That's the issue.
Right.
Well, and it's the other thing you have to look at. Sometimes you have to look at things at their illogical conclusion. Take
Right.
things out to their illogical point. When do they want to start taxing soda or beer or other issues that have carbon dioxide?
Right.
You produce carbon dioxide. So when do they begin taxing the citizens on how much they breathe every year and how much they exhale?
Once government gets away with the
Well,
narratives,
yeah.
and they run out of other people's money,
Right.
they got to start going down. When they run out of rich people's money,
Well,
they go to the middle class.
consider what the Biden administration, actually Kamala Harris, wanted to do unrealized gains and tax them.
That's right.
The problem is there's never a loss of appetite for finding new ways to tax the American public, right? So that's why I want to go back and look at the science on carbon dioxide.
Right.
So we can take it away from the concept of it being a bad thing.
Take it off the table, right?
Take it off the table and go, yeah, this is not just some way to give money to special interests.
I love this.
So,
Eric, you have amazing information and a great little dog.
so her name's Wendy. She's a sweetheart.
Wendy's the next star of our show here. But you've got such great information, and I wish people would look you up some more, and I hope to have you on the show again.
Whenever you like.
Because this information you've got out here, I think if more people become aware of this, it's, for me, instead of just saying that global warming is incorrect and it's wrong, and the people who believe in it, are, basically, worshiping the wrong God, we'll just say.
Right.
Instead of, if we look at the facts, and we learned, how the facts can be used to be not only good stewards of the earth in many other ways, like you outlined today, nuclear power being one of those, then we end up putting tax dollars back into the people's pocket and common sense back into our government in such a way that we all benefit as not only a community and a state, but as a country.
Right. Well, the more money in your pocket, the more you got to spend on pizza, go to movies. But when you're taking money out of people's pockets, economies shrink.
That's right.
And, you know, that's really not the government's business to spend your money.
If I had more money, I'd get a better lawnmower, so that way I can get my tax credits.
Absolutely. All right.
Thank you very much. And everybody else, please, if you know of somebody that wants to know more about the Green New Deal scam, so the great information you heard in this interview, please share the video, share the interview, share the podcast, and also check out more of my shows at William Wallace for America. Thank you so much, Eric. Thank you very much. Appreciate you.
Glad to be here.
Thank you, guys.